Any questions? Yes, please.
My question has to do with how you sell this. And the first part is, how do you first of all convince them that this really represents what's going on, and then secondly, more of the logistics. How do you get the right of way for would you say 150 square mile area to put this in? And actually, part of that also then is, what about the other energy companies? Won't they just say, well, let's wait until it's put in, and then maybe I'll negotiate with you to monitor my wells while it's there?
So the 150 square miles was entirely within the boundaries of the Sanish field. So only one operator owned everything within that. Permitting it, because there's only, you saw the stand, there's only 3 or 4 of those per square mile. So we go around to farmers and we say, can we put this behind your barn or that? It's actually easier. It's actually easier to permit than conventional seismic data, where you've got to run cables across cropland and things like that. And we pay them about $1,000 a year to have that well there, and they're quite happy to take that money. It's very inobtrusive, and if it's radio collected, we don't ever have to go back to the station except if the battery fails or something like that. So permitting of these is not difficult. Selling these, the oil and gas business is the slowest business on the uptake of new technology. There have been studies done. It takes about 3 times as long for new technology to penetrate the oil and gas business as it does the medical trade. And you'd think we were important or something. I don't know. So at any rate, you sell this one geophysicist, one engineer at a time. Not one company, not one country, not one county, one person at a time. And it's just a matter of going out, doing a job. Things happen like we'll hit a fault. We didn't know the fault was there. We'll show them the fault. They'll go back to their seismic data and say, damn, there was a fault there. You're right. And then now we've got a client. But that's the selling process. Please.
Following that same train of thought, in Pennsylvania, where within a unit was 33 acres, and if somebody had the boundaries of the unit are hotly debated in fire halls and church basements, you've shown data where yes, the fracking job picked up a natural fracture and extended where nobody knew it was. In your 2 weeks traveling around Pennsylvania, has anybody asked you for the data to prove ownership?
No one's asked us yet, and we have rule of capture in Texas as well. So in Texas, as long as they stand 473 feet off of the lease boundary, and they drill a well, they frack. If they frack across the boundary and they suck it in, it's theirs. And that's where forced pooling comes in, because then the operator on the other side says, well, he's draining over here, and everybody wants to be fair, and everybody wants to make sure we don't waste resources. It'd be wasteful for me to drill 473 feet on the other side and try to outproduce you. That doesn't help anybody. It costs extra money, it causes extra pollution, and it leaves resources in the ground because you damage the reservoir. So that's the advantage of forced pooling. So will our tool tell you whether you went across a line? Absolutely. Will it tell you you didn't? Absolutely. Has anybody asked me to testify on that basis? Not. No. I should say, to your question, as we're getting to areas where the land is more broken up, we are putting syndicates together, and operators are getting together to put in these arrays. You had a question, sir?
Yes. I don't understand the correlation between the pressure history and the seismic events. For example, you take a segment of the well and you pressurize it. What's the pressure history for that? Do they just raise the pressure up to a certain level and then maintain it? Or does it go to a peak and then drop off to 0? One, and then
when they're fracking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then second, how long do you maintain signals coming out of that fracking cycle?
Sure. Okay. So I didn't show one of the treatment curves, I guess, anywhere in any of my diagrams, but what they will do is, in a typical pumping job, they will pump it up. They will have done a test to see what the fracture gradient is and what the likely fracking pressure is. So they know that in advance. Then they pump up to it, and when they hit that frac pressure, there is a drop back in the pressure. And then they'll maintain that pressure at a certain level to keep the fracs open while they pump the fluid in. And you will actually see that after pumping fluid for a while, they'll start to put sand down. And if the sand starts to plug up the fracs so that they can't get the fluid through, the pressure to maintain the same fluid flow level will start to rise. And that's when they get worried, because that's when they'll blow out gaskets and valves like that. That's called sanding out your well. that pressure will be maintained at a high level to continue propagation of the fracs for anywhere from 30 minutes to 4 hours. We will see microseismic events over that entire time. That's for one stage. And then when they shut that in, they'll turn it off, but they shut it in, they stop pumping, but they don't release the pressure. And that pressure will slowly leak off, and as it leaks off, we'll continue to see microseismic events, usually for 1 or 2 hours after the pumping stops.
So the cracking continues then?
Yeah, some of the cracking continues. Same if you've ever chopped wood, and I bet you have, you hit wood, you know, and it splits, and then it'll continue to frack down the length of the, same thing happens.
One more question?
One more question.
Yeah, every now and then,
Go ahead.
every now and then when you're fracking a well, you'll kill a nearby producer to start producing fracking from that
Yep.
producer.
Yep.
Have you ever predicted that? Have you ever had that kind of ground truth?
Yep.
Where you said we think we'll get
Absolutely. We see it all the time. You bet. The good news is the well usually comes back. Oftentimes stronger than ever. Yeah, I mean, they send the fluid across, but then once the fluid's cleaned out, the gas starts to come back out of the well. And so, yes, there have been wells killed that have been a mile away. You can get fracs propagate that far. You'll get fracking fluid a mile away. You'll get sand.
predicted it from the microseismic?
Well, we didn't predict it in that sense because we weren't doing it in real time. But we showed events that went way over to another well, and we